Just so y'all know, I am calling in this evening from the East Coast time zone. So it is considerably later here
Great.
for me than it is for you.
We have a quorum.
Excellent. All right, welcome everyone to Monday, July 18th, 2022 meeting of the East Bay Community Energy Community Advisory Committee meeting. Will the clerk please call roll?
Great, thank you. Member Landry. Member Landry.
Present.
Thank you. Member Frank. Member Frank. Member Lou.
Here.
Thank you. Member Swaminathan. Member
Frank
Lakshman.
and Swaminathan are both excused.
Great. Member Lakshman.
Yeah, I'm here.
Member Taria. Member Checo.
Excused.
Thank you. Member Souza.
I'm here.
Thank you. Member Hernandez.
Present. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Lutz. Vice Chair Mutzenberg.
Here.
And Chair Eldred.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We will start with public comment. As a reminder, this item is reserved for persons wishing to address this body on any EBCE related matters that are not otherwise on this meeting agenda. Public comments on matters listed on the agenda shall be heard at the time the matter is. Have we received any public comment as of 5 p.m. yesterday, or do we have any members of the public with their hand raised?
We do have members with their hands raised, Jessica Tovar and Tom Kelly. I recognize Jessica Tovar for 3 minutes.
Hello, sorry, I'm using a different account, but my name is Naya Tisdell. I am an energy democracy organizer with the local Clean Energy Alliance. I want to urge you to reject the $15 million donation to UCSF Benny Hoff Children's Hospital and to instead reallocate this immense amount of funding into local development business plan programs. The hospital is already extremely well funded and the community is in deep need of resources to support equity programs and projects. EBCE's customers and the community at large deserve equitable access to local clean energy programs and projects that address energy needs so that no child, no adult, no elderly person has to even end up in the hospital for things like asthma. We must directly reduce the major root causes of asthma for present and future well-being of our communities. So we need this to be also a completely transparent public process as it is advertised on EBCE's website. The East Bay community members must be heard, listened to, and intentionally considered in this decision-making process. And so EBCE's original goals are to invest in local development, repair the harms of environmental racism within the community that it serves, and address the root causes of these issues. And so this decision around this $15 million donation could definitely make a huge impact in people's lives. And so I am urging you to reallocate this fund and make sure that it is a public process. Thank you.
Speaker, before you leave, can you please give me your name one more time, please?
Naya Tisdell, N-Y-A-H. Last name Tisdell, T-I-S-D-E-L-L.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Naya.
Tom Kelly, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. So, as I recall, at the last CAC meeting, the CAC voted to take a different path on that $15 million grant to UCSF. And I think the idea was basically to open up the process to a more public participation and solicit recommendations from other organizations on how that money might be spent. So what you came up with was more or less, at least in my estimation, along those lines. It also suggested that the CAC was not enthusiastic about this grant to Benioff Children's Hospital. what I would like to know, this has been bugging me ever since this came up, is how this whole issue came up in the first place. Can we, since EBCE is a public agency, and we're not talking about contracts where prices have to be redacted and kept confidential, how did this issue come up in the first place? Who's the champion for it? And why has EBCE gone so far to solicit support for the grant? I would also say that well, let me move on just to a second point, and that is that as far as EBCE goes and its obligation to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and provide competitive rates, I just wanted to say that if you've been reading the news and you've been alert lately, you'll know that the planet is really in serious trouble. Fires everywhere, drought everywhere, migration as a result of climate chaos everywhere. And yet, EBCE continues to refuse to improve the quality of its power mix. We're producing climate warming gases at rates higher than any other CCA in Northern California, higher than PG&E. And I ask you, I mean, what is it going to take? I mean, what do we have to do in order to get this organization to comply with the dream or that all of us had who had some we're participatory in this development of this agency. What do we need to do? What are we missing? Why is it possible for EBCE to continue to pollute the atmosphere and yet bank hundreds of millions of dollars? Somebody give me an answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further public comment.
Thank you, Tom. And as a quick response to our public speakers, so you know the issue of the $15 million grants, and Tom, you did do a good job of summarizing the CAC stance on it, has been moved to the executive agenda on July 29th for vote in September. So remember that the board is on recess for the month of August. So July 29th, this will be heard at the executive committee. And I encourage you to show up and participate in that meeting. Staff was directed to bring forth a variety of options of what it would look like. And so we all look forward to see that presentation. All right, so if there is no further public comments, then we will move on to agenda item 3, which is approval of minutes from June 13th. I would ask if there is any comments or amendments from the members of this body, and then I will look for a motion and any public comment. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes from June 13th?
Motion to approve.
Hernandez moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Seconded by Vice Chair Mutzenberg. Are there any public comments received on this item or any members of the public with their hands raised?
There is no public comment for this item.
Excellent. Seeing no discussion from the members of the committee, can we please have a roll call vote?
Great, thank you. Member Landry. Member Landry. Wait for Member Landry to unmute herself. Member Frank. Member Liu.
Approve.
Thank you. Member Swaminathan. Member Lakshmi.
Approved.
Thank you. Member Landry.
Yes.
Thank you. Member Taria. Member Checa, Member Souza,
Yes.
Member Hernandez,
Yes.
Member Lutz, Member Mutzenberg,
Yes.
Chair Elden.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Excellent. So then we will go into the CAC chair reports. Vice Chair, would you like to report back from the meeting last month?
Yeah, I'll give, let me pull up the report that I had, or the quick summary that I had sent you. So just let me pull that up really quick.
Absolutely. Just as just to let folks know, at the next meeting on Wednesday's meeting for the Board of Directors, beyond the items that we have on today's agenda for input from the CAC, there are a number of other items that the board is going to be voting on, including a considerable number of contracts and amendments that is on the consent agenda. And we are not going through anything on the CEO report tonight, although that is that presentation in PDF is on the website. There's also the prepaid transaction summary that will also be voted on. So if anybody is wanting to weigh in on those items, you are able to do so, as the CAC is not taking a stance on that. You just go and you can identify yourself as a member, but that you are representing yourself and your constituency.
Sorry, I'm not finding my summary that I had sent to you, and I apologize. I've had some tech issues on my end for the last week that I'm still trying to like sort out. I believe at the last meeting that there was, correct me if I'm wrong, Anna Olivia, but I think we had that the legislative update in the last agenda meeting, if I'm not correct. And I think that the
Have them a lot
board,
this time of year.
at which one?
I said we have them a lot this time of year.
Yeah, we've done a lot of legislative updates compared to last year. So, but I think if I remember correctly, the biggest item that I wanted to just address is that the board did make a switch. We wanted to remain neutral on that one piece of legislation, but the board approved the staff's recommendation of support. Just trying to pull up which, trying to find where that is. So, yeah, it was, I believe it was, oh gosh, where was it?
Actually not finding it either, which is
Yeah, I'm
great.
not, I'm like, I love when technology doesn't pull up when I need,
Well,
it, but
we can come back to this.
yeah, let's
as
come back to
well.
that.
Okay. So if we need to, we can circle back to that at the end of the meeting. Yeah. All right. So while we're looking for that report, because it was created, we would like to move into item C5, which is a legislative update. And that presentation is going to be given by Alec. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Alec Ward, I am a policy associate manager at EBCE. For this presentation, I'm going to walk through state of play on state legislative process. We have a recommendation for a bill position that I'll present, and then also give you all a quick update on federal policy work we've been doing for the past year. So next slide, please. So we presented this timeline for every slideshow so far. You can see we're moving through. Currently, we are into the fiscal committee of the second house. And the second house has until August 31st to pass pieces of legislation. Next page, please. So this is an update on the state budget process. We had AB 205 was an energy budget trailer bill that became law on June 30th. It was a very encompassing trailer bill. It gave, just to hit a couple high points here, gave $1 billion for arrearage forgiveness in the CA arrearage payment program, that's CAP. It had a large focus on avoiding blackouts in coming years with strategic reliability reserve programs. And these are funding programs for emergency supply and load during extreme events, programs focused on dispatchable customer load and backup, as well as funding for the Department of Water Resources to make reliability investments. There was some siting streamlining as well for renewable projects, investments in long duration energy storage, the allowance of changes to residential fixed charges. And on top of all this, we also expect another energy trailer bill next month to resolve some of the still outstanding issues. So we're going to be keeping a close eye and working on this. Next slide, please. Jumping to the action item here, this is a bill that's up right now, SB 1385. It's Cortese, and that's the author. And we're recommending opposed unless amended on this bill. High 1 cent overview would create new in front of the meter program for IOU owns local solar and storage on or near multifamily housing. We actually do see a number of issues with this bill though. The bill may not actually serve low income customers, as it doesn't ensure that the customers near the system are the ones that are actually being served, as it is IOU owned and it's going to be IOU completely controlled. It also states that customers in high fire districts are eligible regardless of income. It's also very unclear how the IOUs would pay for this program, meaning they would be incentivized to build more and more systems to maximize their own payback. Much of this program doesn't seem like it'll impact CCA customers directly, but we would like to push an amendment that will ensure that CCA customers are not eligible for this program. That will mitigate the risks of the IOUs trying to use this program to pull CCA customers away, CCA customers. So that's the action item that we'll come back to, but in the meantime, the next slide here will kick us off into the federal policy update section. Excuse me, the next, you can keep moving through. These are previous bills that we've taken positions on through the board, and including those that we're watching. We've presented on all these in previous slideshows to the board. So this is a new item right here. It's a federal legislative update about all of our federal activities. There are 3 priorities here right in front of you. Unfortunately, it's been whittled down to 2 opportunities. The first item of the 3 right there was the climate package in reconciliation. And that was very unfortunately taken off the table last week. So that won't be an action item. Originally, we were going to ask for board support for the board to support this bill. It would have brought a lot of potential funding to EBC priorities, extension of the investment tax credit, extension of the production tax credit, clean energy manufacturing tax credits, EV credits, fee on methane emissions. Is very encompassing. Many of these you might remember were originally in the Build Back Better, which was essentially shut down by Senator Manchin in West Virginia at this point last winter, as they need the Democrats, all 50, to sign on to get something through reconciliation. So now, after, again, months of very intensive behind closed doors dealing, Senator Manchin is again walking away. So that means that we're essentially out of time for a substantial climate package in this Congress. But we're hoping that we will be able to push these exact priorities in the next Congress. So not completely gone, but it'll be hard to get a bill this encompassing, we imagine, in the coming future. Right, on to brighter news. That was the bad news there. There's still a lot of good federal opportunities ahead that we're working. The second item here is one we're extremely excited about: community project funding, also called congressionally directed spending, also called earmarks, depends who you ask. But through this process, legislators can designate funding in an appropriation bill for specific projects. They get thousands and thousands of requests, and they're allowed only to submit a limited number of funding. So we submitted requests for solar and storage on municipal buildings for resilience, and also for EV charger installations in multifamily housing neighborhoods. and these projects would touch down all across their territory. And we were very excited to have Representative Swalwell, Representative Khanna, and Senator Padilla and Feinstein put forth 7 of these projects for a potential total of $7.43 million. So that in itself is very extremely to get this far in the process, especially when the whittling down is so intense. But it doesn't at all mean that we're going to get all this money. In fact, it'd be very unlikely if we get the full amount, as it still has to pass the Senate and it has to be combined together and passed and then signed. But we will likely see funding through this process from where we're standing right now. As you can see, the deadline is October 1st, but oftentimes this is pushed back further than we would like. The last item here is the infrastructure bill. It was passed last fall, you might remember. It dedicates $1.2 trillion to funding for public projects spanning water, broadband, bridges, roads, energy. So we're currently helping agencies at the federal and state level roll out a lot of these programs, the ones that we're interested in, and we'll be submitting applications for these grant funding opportunities later this year. And we're really targeting programs that can incentivize our EV charging stations, our resilience programs, and our EE programs. So a big shot to bolster and build out a lot of the great work our programs team is doing. And I think after this, the next slide should be where we would have held the action item for the reconciliation package, which is no longer relevant. So I think that will conclude this presentation. Thank you.
The mute button. Thank you so much for that presentation. It's really appreciated. I will go first to any public comment or received by 5 p.m. yesterday, or members of the public with their hands raised. For some reason, I cannot see participants right now. So I ask the clerk for assistance.
There is no public comment at this time.
Excellent. Are there any questions from our panelists for Alec? All right, seeing none, I do appreciate that. I have a quick question for you. Is there anything in particular on this that you would ask members of this body to assist with or help get the word out about, or organize lobbying calls or anything like that?
Right, as much as I appreciate that, I don't think anything at this time, but as soon as something does come up, we'll certainly reach out. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that. That was the easiest legislative update we've ever had. Then I will go next to the item 6, which is director and CAC stipend updates.
Apologies for interrupting, but does there need to be a vote on SB 1985?
That is a good, that's not an interruption, that's just good. So then I would be turning to the CAC and seeing if there is a motion. I assume staff is looking for a motion of support for the staff recommendation.
That's correct.
Excellent. A member of this body who'd like to make that motion. We do not have to take a stance on this, but.
So moved.
All right, motion of support for member Hernandez. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Second by member Souza. Can you, is there any discussion from this body?
Just
Seeing none.
briefly, Chair, Audrey, just briefly, I just want to, I know we're looking to incentivize support legislation to bring more clean energy. I think we also look at, the tools or solutions or products that we use to do that, and then understand the life of those products like solar panels, and then ensure that we are going to do solar storage, but also looking when those products no longer are good and resulting in landfill waste, toxic waste. So I think we have to make sure we understand how are those products once they live their life for 25, 30 years. What are they doing to decommission? How are we managing that waste successfully and seeing that they get recycled? I think that's just one concern I have. But as we incentivize more folks to put clean solar on the rooftops, even over canals now. I saw that PG&E is looking to do not solar panels, but solar canals, where you put the panels over canals. That was a typo. How are we going to work with the waste after they live their life? How do we repurpose it? So I think that's just some thoughts and feedback I've communicated with Chair. Just something to bring up to your attention. Thank you.
Alec, do you have a response to that, or is this something that we should be getting into in item 8?
I think it might be another item. This program would incentivize the solar and storage on some households, but we still see it as bad policy. So we're asking for an opposed loss amend for this. So if the concern is waste for solar and storage, then this would essentially help that by not supporting this. But we, of course, like solar and storage, just doing it right.
Thank you.
Member Souza?
Yes, thank you. I was looking at or trying to read as quickly as possible that whether or not this was just encompassing for renewables and for EV and for EV charging stations. What about some of the other aspects of reduction, such as energy efficiency? Is any of that going to be allocated in that direction? Thank you.
Is this for the budget that we're discussing now, the AB 205?
I believe it was the second or the third and fourth quarter dollars, but there was also the community project funding as well. I think you mentioned that as well, but mostly for the infrastructure bill.
Okay. The infrastructure bill. So this is discussing the federal legislative item I'd updated on. So yes, there is a pot of money that will go to a number of EE programs. In fact, there's 3 or 4 of them that we're tracking. And we're talking to the CEC this week, actually, about how we can help implement that those programs and potentially even access it. So it's certainly one of our priorities.
Oh, thank you very much.
I had some comments on this one. So if I understood your presentation correctly, what we're looking at is a bill that specifically undermines CCA customers by excluding them from participation in a solar incentive program, is not crafted with equity language or even an equity focus as, or at least an economically based equity focus, because it does not specify that it has to benefit low income customers. There is an unclear funding mechanisms which could pass higher costs on to customers, including those not capable or not eligible to participate in the project. And to top it off, the IOUs would then own the sun that shines on people's roofs instead of passing that on to them. Is that an accurate summary?
Yes, just to make sure I got the first part right, we're asking that we prevent CCA customers from being able to participate in this program because for the reasons you've mentioned, we don't think it's a good policy to incent storage and solar.
Okay, and that we would want a different one to incent storage and solar and not this one.
Correct.
All right, I will
similar to the
be
programs we're offering right now.
enthusiastic. I would lend my enthusiastic report to staff support to staff's recommendation there.
Okay.
All of those things were bad. So, all right, is there further discussion or clarification on the presentation? As we have a motion and a second, can the clerk please call a roll call vote?
Great, thank you. Member Landry.
Abstain.
Member Frank. Member Liu.
Yes.
Member Swaminathan. Member Lakshman.
Yes.
Member Taria. Member Pacheco. Member Souza.
Yes.
Member Hernandez.
Yes.
Member Lutz. Member Mutzenberg.
Yes.
And Chair Eldred.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Now we are moving on to the next item, which is an update on the director and CAC stipends. I'm wondering which staff is presenting this item?
That would be me, Jason Bartlett, Finance Manager.
Great, and just do a quick summary for us, and then I've got some clarifying questions on there too.
Absolutely. So this was first brought through the FAB committee. It was discussed as to whether or not we should make any adjustments to the stipend for board members. Afterwards, it did go through the CAC committee last month. Some recommendations were made, and those were passed on. And then this now is the proposal to go to the board for this meeting. The changes that we see here are that the director stipend would be updated by the CPI as indicated in the.
Can you please explain your acronyms to the members of this body?
Sure. The Consumer Price Index is determined by the Department of Labor and U.S. Department of Labor, and is indicative of consumer price changes in San Francisco, Oakland, and Hayward specifically. That is as close as we could get to all of Alameda County. And the CAC stipend would also be updated by the same metric. And this would occur every June based upon the annual changes to the CPI. Directors can be eligible for stipends for attendance at additional meetings, commissions, boards, and committees as stated in the JPA. But this has some of the directors have proposed that this be limited to a cap of 4 per month. So if a director attends more than 4 meetings per month, they will only be reimbursed on the stipend for 4, up to 4. The fiscal aspect, the fiscal impact that was determined is that the overall stipends would increase by about 20.07% to catch up with the base or to catch up with CPI starting from inception of the JPA. As such, there's also a new adjustment to the total maximum potential cost to the district, which increases from about $29,400 to $56,900 for the current year. And the large bulk of that additional income is not just the increase in the stipend, but the additional meetings that directors could attend. And so as such, a resolution has been developed and it's now being put forth.
So just as clarification on this, you're presenting a percentage increase, even though the board stipend is double that of the CAC. So if we apply that percentage across the meeting going forward, we will in fact be increasing the amount of disparity in between what the CAC members and the board members are receiving, and that will get worse every year. Is that correct?
Both are being raised at an equal percentage.
So like when we see, when we do disparity studies in the county, we take a look at what is the entry point, right? So if you apply a straight percentage and one group like women make less money than men, and you do a percentage increase, then you are increasing the gap between the two every year. So in the numbers that you presented, the board stipend goes up by over $20 and the CAC stipend goes up by $10. And so each time that disparity is going to be getting bigger because it's a percentage of a number. So staff's proposal is to increase the gap and compound that increase every year going forward. Or are you suggesting that we remain at 50%, say, of staff, which is what CAC members are currently valued at?
Based upon the previously approved resolutions with the board in relation to payments to this CAC, I'm just applying a metric that's in accordance with those. I am not proposing we are not proposing any changes to those pre-existing resolutions or any language within the JPA.
Right, but would the
I think if you apply a percentage increase, the same percentage increase to both dollar levels, recognizing that the dollar level is going to change, the dollar difference between the two numbers will change, the percentage is going to remain the same. So it will remain 50% of.
Will remain 50%.
Yeah, the percentage will not.
And the number of meetings that the directors can participate in has increased, but the number of meetings that the CAC can participate in has not increased. Is that correct?
That is correct. The number of meetings allocated to a CAC member for attendance in which they actually perform a service such as voting or commenting as is written in the language of the resolutions. There is only one that they really attend that meets that qualification, except for the chair, who qualifies for 2 because the chair will also attend the CAC meeting and the board meeting.
Even though members of the CAC do in fact participate and attend extra meetings outside and go back to their constituencies and the Labor Council and Interfaith and all of those things, and they report back.
Are they attending as panelists or as...
That is why we were, that is, they are not welcomed into.
That's something I'm not aware of, but I am just going within the language of existing resolutions and the JPA charter.
Yeah, I would just clarify that, you know, when a EBCE board member may sit on one of their other bodies to sort of report back on EBCE matters, we're not reimbursing those. So we are not issuing a stipend to those board members for sitting in sort of other meetings. So they are EBCE specific meetings that we're clarifying.
But when we bring the meetings that we're asked to attend to those meetings, we're also not. So I'm very upset by this. I'm sure that is obvious as I hide almost nothing with my facial expressions. I would like staff, as this is a recommendation from staff that was brought to the board, I would like to hear the rationale as to why.
This is not a staff recommendation. This is a recommendation that came from the FAP subcommittee. So we are presenting the policy as they proposed it. I will note that the CAC comments came after that. So I think this discussion will be very welcome, I assume, at the regular board meeting on Wednesday. We didn't feel like staff were in this situation, since the FAP subcommittee had specifically proposed a recommendation at that subcommittee, that we should alter that.
Oh, that's super helpful. So
yeah, so this is not
that meeting has happened.
This is what we really think is best. We're really just presenting what the subcommittee had sort of directed us to present to the regular board. And I also think that the board will likely, they would likely welcome, obviously, to be determined on Wednesday, but I would assume they would be likely to welcome, discussion and dialogue in regards to it.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. That was a really helpful clarification for me. And I do see a member of the panel with their hand raised, so I'll go into there. I will remind this body that we did make a recommendation that CAC stipends match, get moved up to match whatever board stipends are. And that was our vote last time. So we'll move now to member Souza.
Waiting on me?
Yeah.
I apologize. I raised my hand, I don't know how, and I'm going to lower it. Sorry about that.
Excellent. All right. Are there any comments from members of the public or any comment received by 5 p.m. yesterday?
There are no comments from members of the public.
All right. So at this moment, what I would be doing is bringing our recommendation from last time and all my feels about it to the board meeting on Wednesday. If there is any other direction that you would want me to give, please let me know. And Member Landry, you recognized?
Yes, I just want to say, Chair Eldred, that I do agree with your comments. And I think that this, while perhaps not intentional, it does create greater disparities between the CAC members and the board. So yeah, so I'd like to advocate for a different formula than the CPI. I think it should be a flat rate. And I think it should be higher than what is being proposed now, because it doesn't account for all the preparation and other demand. So I just would like to see a different presentation than this.
Thank you, Cynthia. All right, so it was a really helpful clarification that this is the same proposal as last time, and that will be being heard on Wednesday. I will bring our recommendation that we voted on last time to that meeting. And seeing no further comment, is there any other comments that folks would like to make on this item? Cynthia, is your hand still raised, or is it raised again? Got it. All right, then we will move to the next item, which I anticipate to be a little bit heavy. So we will be doing our best to this as best as possible. I know we've received some comments. So the joint rate mailer in draft 2021
Chair
is being presented by
Chair Elder. I'm not sure if other folks are having audio issues, but I was having some audio issues trying to hear what you were trying to say.
I think the wind is blowing, Chair Eldred, so that may be causing the audio to kick in and out as background noise, just so you're aware.
Oh, I will move to somewhere less windy then. The next item is being presented by which staff member?
I think that is Izzy Carson and Annie Henderson.
So they can start their presentation.
Annie, we can't hear you. It looks like you're talking, but you're still muted.
Thank you. Sorry, I was double muted. Thank you, Howard. Apologies all. Hi, I'm Annie Henderson. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Account Services at EBCE. Apologies for my small assistant joining me here this evening. She will hopefully be of minimal distraction. What I'm presenting here tonight is the presentation that was made previously to the Executive Committee, and then the Executive Committee requested that we bring it back to the full board. I did make some revisions to the previously posted presentation, meaning the one that made to the Executive Committee, in order to respond to some of their questions and provide additional information. If you could go to the next slide, please, Adrian. Okay, come on, please. Go from there. Thank you very much. So apologies, what I'm seeing on my screen is a very, very small version. And so I'm going to try and pull it up separately. Very quickly, I wanted to make a comparison between the joint rate comparison and the joint rate mailer. There are two different items that we are required to present to the public. And so the joint rate comparison, we have to do multiple times a year. It is dependent on when there are changes to rates, be those EBCE or PG&E. You have to have that posted within 60 days. That is a PDF that gets posted on our website as well as PG&E's website. That is in contrast to the joint rate mailer. This is an actual customer notification that must go out via email or hard copy mail once a year to all existing customers. The deadline for that is July 1st. In years past, we have often requested and received an extension. Typically, it is because PG&E's rates have not changed the January 1 standard timeline, and so we wanted to extend in order to reflect those. This year, the PUC, in fact, rejected the request for extension. So we did get these out by July 1. When we sent this to the executive committee, it was prior to July 1. We were giving them a heads up. What we're presenting now is more of a update on what was shared with our customers. I want to just point out one other, well, actually, can we go to the next slide, please, Adrian? Because I wanted to point out this particular component. So in years past, on both the joint rate comparison and the joint rate mailer, PG&E's customer column for the row of the power choice and difference adjustment, it would say 0. However, it was understood within the standard rate making, well, understood by those who follow this very closely, that the PCIA is in fact embedded in the PG&E generation rates. So as part of better transparency to a customer, though that is questionable if it's actually effective, PG&E now reports a line item for their power charge and difference adjustment, which in some cases makes sense because it is the above market costs of contracts entered into in the past that would otherwise be stranded with bundled customers, and which is why CCA customers must also pay this. In the joint rate comparison, this was the first time it came out. We hadn't perhaps fully acknowledged the potential interpretation by the public. We went with our 2018 PCIA vintage, which is the most common vintage within our service territory because that was the year in which that we launched. We do have some other vintages within our customers, but the 2018 vintage is the most common and represents the large majority of our customers. Please go into the other one. Please go on down. Apologies for that. However, that then causes a sort of strange presentation because PG&E customers are always paying the most current PCIA, and historically the most current PCIA typically tends to be higher than older vintages. But because we set our rates inclusive of our PCIA, and in fact, the generation rate plus the PCIA is in fact the true cost to the customer, it looked a little strange. So for the joint rate mailer, what we did was represent our generation rates in line with the most current PCIA vintage, therefore giving a better apples to apples comparison for the generation rate itself. And this slide represents that. If we could go to the next slide, please. You'll see that this is just an example, a visual of what was sent out in hard copy to our customers, but it's very difficult to read in this small print. So if we can go on to the next slide, I can show you more specific information. So as the joint rate mailer would suggest, its focus has been, I think the intention was to be on rates, but rates in and of themselves perhaps is a little too narrow focused. And so there is a component of the power content as well. But what I'm going to focus on in this slide is in fact the rates. So on the sort of left-hand section of this table, you see what we represent in the joint rate comparison, which uses our 2018 vintage PCIA for EBCE customers. And you can see there it's lower, it's 2.044 cents as compared to a PG&E customer, which is paying 2.653 cents. But when you look at if you add the PCIA and gen rate, EBCE is in fact cheaper for our Bright Choice product, which is why the average monthly bill for this standard residential customer is about 57 cents cheaper than a standard PG&E customer. For the joint rate mailer, in order to try and reduce that potential customer confusion, we made all the PCIAs the same vintage so that it is a little bit more straightforward to see that the generation rate for Bright Choice is in fact lower than PG&E. I do want to make a note that for all joint rate comparisons and joint rate mailers, They are unique to each CCA. So you can see down at the bottom here, it says average monthly usage, 390 kilowatt hours. That is specific to EBCE customers. In other service territories, let's say like in Sonoma Clean Power, it's a lot warmer weather. They might have a much higher usage, and their usage is actually mapped out differently across the time of use periods and seasons. So this is very unique to EBCE customers. And this, total electricity cost line that you see sort of just above the bold row there, that is not a number that you're ever going to see on the bill, because it is an aggregate of all of the different like line items or time of use billing determinants is what we call them, as well as the seasonal rate changes. However, it's based on massive amounts of data that is specific to our customers. Next slide, please. So I added this one since we had, I'm sorry, can you go one up? I think we skipped one. Oh, you are not, Adrian, you are not showing the same presentation that was posted to the website. Could you please change to the presentation that was posted to the website? We should be looking at a slide 6 that includes comparison of CC rates over time, CCA rates over time. While he's pulling that up, I'll just continue to go through this. So what I wanted to do, based on some of the feedback from the executive committee, is show difference in rates over time. So what did things look like in 2020, 2021, and 2022 for both a base product, thank you very much, okay, and a 100% renewable product. For the 2020 and 2021, I was able to look at the joint rate mailers. So you got the 2021 content in 2021, you got the 2021 content in 2022. And for 2022, I had to look at, in this case, it's for, or I'm sorry, we're looking at rates, not power content. I apologize. So these are based on the joint rate mailers for those years, with the exception of Clean Power Alliance, who has not yet posted their 2022, excuse me, their 2022 joint rate mailer. Please go find your father. Okay, apologies again. Okay, well then please go sit down. So what we see here is that EBCE has maintained a discount over the last 3 years. And of course, we have recently increased that. You see a little bit more variation in some of the CCAs that are not directly pegged to PG&E. The assumption, these comparisons, of course, are to PG&E. So the assumption is for CCAs that are really, they're on more of what we call a cost of service. They have stability in their rates across time, but variability when compared to PG&E. We have stability in comparison to PG&E, but perhaps variability over time as PG&E rates change. I do want to call out that again, the 2022 for EBCE, MCE, Clean Power Finance, and San Jose Clean Energy are all based on this year's joint rate mailer. Clean Power Finance, I haven't seen that published yet. And so this was based on the most recently published data for active rates, which was their 2022 joint rate comparison, which were rates as of March, I believe. It was their most recent rates at that time. And it says 23% and 23%. In fact, I did the calculation incorrectly. For the base product, it was an 18% premium. For the premium product, it was closer to 29%. There was, it was pointed out to me that in June 2nd of 2022, there was a vote of the board to, in light of SCEs. So Clean Power Finance also pegs their rates. Maybe they didn't previously. They are now looking to somewhat peg their rates to Southern California Edison, SCE, and they will be moving effective July 1 to a 0% premium for their baseline product and a 3% premium for their 100% renewables product. So apologies for all those distractions. I believe that's now taken care of, and I can pass to, or I'll go through the next one, Izzy, but I can see that you're there. So Izzy Carson, who is our manager on our power resources team, and is responsible for doing all the work that goes into the power source disclosure report, which eventually becomes our power content label, which is not yet fully approved because that happens in October. That's just the cycle that it's always on. However, she's here to answer any questions. So our power content comparison does go on to the joint rate mailer, even though it's not yet approved by the CEC, who oversees the power content label, until October. But we have these numbers. They typically don't change much. I will say PG&E is waiting for approval of a different renewable number, but it's 48.1% rather than 48.7%. So what we present here is what PG&E has approved at this time for renewables. So we are more carbon-free power than PG&E if you do not include nuclear power, which was rejected by our board as a clean power source when we were given the opportunity to potentially take an allocation of nuclear power. But otherwise, you know, we had set a previous policy to look at the PG&E forecast for renewables and renewables that qualify under the California Renewable Portfolio Standard. So those are the ones that you see here. Eligible hydroelectric, meaning smaller hydroelectric. Large hydroelectric is not considered renewable. It's a different line item. So we look at the forecast from PG&E, and then we add 5% as a buffer so that in our procurement strategy, we can be equivalent or better than PG&E. In years past, we've hit it. We've done well. This year, PG&E's forecast, if we can go to the next slide, PG&E's forecast was 36.5%. So in fact, with our 42.3, we were more than a percentage above what PG&E had forecast. However, what they came in at was something much higher. That was not part of their initial forecast. And seeing the flaws in this policy and knowing that we have larger goals around our 2030 100% clean target, we have shifted our procurement policy and procurement strategy to focus on that 2030 goal. And there is a chart here that Izzy knows much better than I do. If we can maybe come back to that if people have questions. So the target, sorry, can we go to the next slide, please? You know, the draft, PG&E, this is just sort of reiterating what we presented on our joint rate mailer for the power content. However, looking forward, we're now taking a different approach because the trying to match PG&E's forecast is an imperfect science. We are focused on our 2030 goal, and so we see renewable percentages going forward for 2022 at 50%, 2023 at 54%. And if we could go to the next slide, please. I added this in again since the last presentation to show the total amount of renewables over time. PG&E versus EBCE Bright Choice. Didn't bother to show renewable 100, it's 100% renewable for that product. But you can see that, especially in 2019, we did a great job coming in over PG&E in 2020 and 2021, which I think were slightly leaner years. You know, we weren't able to procure as much RPS renewables. However, on average, we have, you know, we do come in above PG&E, and it is, you know, unfortunate that we were lower this year. We all believe that climate change is an issue that needs urgent and immediate attention, but there are market factors at work here, and we have focused on that 2030 goal. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Again, another one that I added since our last, since we had questions about other CCAs and how they're doing. So just broke out the RPS renewables, large hydro, nuclear, and then summed up the non-nuclear, carbon-free, and then noted the differential between PG&E and EBCE. Or I'm sorry, I didn't notice the differential. I did not note the differential in the non-nuclear carbon-free. I noted the cost differential. So as you can look across here, you do have some very high percentage non-nuclear carbon-free. You know, in the case of Clean Power SS, they do have access to Hetch Hetchy, so they're doing well there. And then I think the last slide we have here is just sort of some of the main talking points that we put out for the board around rates and the power content. So with that, I have completed my slides. And I'll wait for the chair to open it up for discussion.
Thank you. That was awesome. We'll go first to public comment. Was there any public comment received by 5 p.m. yesterday, or any members of the public with their hands raised?
There is no public comment at this time.
Really? All right. Okay, we'll come back to that. Is there any questions from any of the panelists? Member Hernandez?
I just want to thank you for that presentation, Penny, and in regards to the efforts, and appreciate you balancing life, as we call it here in our Zoom world. I think there's a lot of good information here. I appreciate the efforts, and the trends are great to see that, you know, there's that value differentiation, and we are working towards, you know, a cleaner and more renewable future for East Bay Community Energy. Do you think at one point will we see more of a push across just having the one product, the renewable 100? I mean, maybe it's something on parity with PG&E versus a premium. Do you see that somehow happening in the future?
Yeah, so our 2030.
Please.
Sure, I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead. Or the risk, I was saying.
Yeah, so the 2030 goal is to basically have our bright choice product be 100% clean between RPS renewables and large hydroelectric, and still be able to offer that at a discount. And, you know, I was looking at the recitals from our JPA this afternoon, and it does say that we should have a discounted product as well as a 100% renewable product. The recitals are not binding, so we're not beholden to that. I think, you know, one difficulty with having only a 100% renewable product for a territory of our size is having that, you know, the next step in our evolution is to do like a 24/7 match. And as we all know, it's very difficult to do 24 hours a day renewables content unless we build up a lot more storage. So I think that would be one barrier to overcome if we were to go to 100% renewables. However, it's a wonderful barrier. It's a wonderful problem to have. This is the direction we need to go as a state and the country and the globe. And I think we see that leadership from many of our cities who are opting to default their communities to the renewable 100 product. However, that bright choice option still remains. And I will point out that in 2 of the cities that had initially gone for Brilliant 100 as their default, and then changed to renewable 100 when the Brilliant 100 product was sunset, we focused our communication on making sure customers knew they had a choice, that it wasn't just renewable 100 at premium or go back to PG&E. And we did see that 10% of the eligible populations in those communities opted down to the bright choice product. So they opted to continue to receive a discount, which to me was a sign of a very successful communications campaign, because they opted to stay with EBCE just with a discounted product rather than returning to PG&E. So I can't speak for the agency, but I can, in terms of will we eliminate a product? But certainly our goal is for Bright Choice to be 100% clean by 2030. And I believe it's important that we continue to offer a discount product as well as 100% renewables. And I think having 100% renewables that is true 24/7 at a discount, that's going to take us some more time.
And may I just follow up on that? So I think really reducing the unspecified sources of power, or that 40% on slide 7, is really what we're looking to reduce, because that can be mixed with many things. And we know that maybe less than 2%, you're saying that was nuclear. And I know there's concerns out there about, can we sustain the renewable clean future? And maybe through the governor's budget, he's incentivizing to keep something like the Apple Canyon open. I just don't know the conversation at the board level, but I think that's a new element there for the agency to look at and see how that's going to evolve the goal for 2030. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Souza?
Yes, thank you. I agree with Mr. Hernandez with the slide 7. The unspecified sources of power are a little bit worrisome. I don't see PG&E having any unspecified sources of power. So that would be nice to see that broken down. By the way, I really appreciated this succinct presentation. That's the only question I had, was the unspecified sources of power. Thank you.
Oh, and I actually have a follow-up on that. Is this one of the things that comes from like the asset controlling supplier, or is this a different body of energy?
I'm going to ask Izzy or Howard to respond to that, please.
So unspecified sources of power, just to reiterate what was said, electricity is not traceable to a specific generating facility. So it could be traded through open market transactions. It's typically a mix of resources. It might include renewables, but it's not traceable to a specific facility. I don't know if that helps to clarify.
I'm only asking because I had to do a research project, and I always just chose UBCE because it was the easiest one to choose. It's relevant. And the majority of things that were coming through asset controlling supplier were looking at the potential sources that could be feeding into that were really very clean. Ultimately, like they were quite good. We were getting a lot of that from Oregon, and predominantly, I mean, it would have to be some mix, but it was a favorable mix, even though it couldn't be attributed to a single source. Like the potential sources there were by and large good. So I was just wondering if that unspecified power was coming from an asset controlling supplier, or if that was coming from just grid energy, or where that was coming from.
I believe it can come from a mix of all sources, but I think that asset control could be in there as well.
Okay. Right, and any of those kinds of disruptions are always welcome. The human bits are always welcome, and they're great. It's just great. All right, are there further questions on this? That was really informative and helps put into place some of the questions that have been coming at us from the public, and understanding the difference between what the forecast was and what it ended up being. And so, we do our best to plan, and it doesn't always work that way. So that was super helpful. Are there anything else from members of this body? Going again to members of the public. Tom, we've received some comments. Oh, you're not there. All right. Well, thank you for that, and thank you for responding directly and promptly to the questions and concerns from the members of the public. It is deeply respected and appreciated. So, seeing no further questions on that, we will move into the Sun Run Resource Adequacy Amendment. And I know you told me who was presenting that, and I think it's Howard.
Yes,
I
it's
could
Howard
just be
Chang.
wrong. It's Howard. Awesome. I'd like to start. Howard, you were muted if you were trying.
My apologies. Here we go. So this, can you guys hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Sorry about that. So this is related to our Sunrun contract. Almost 3 years to the day in July of 2019, the board had approved us moving forward with an agreement with Sunrun to deliver 0.5 megawatt, 500 kWs of local resource adequacy from solar and storage projects, partially on low-income multifamily housing properties in Alameda County. Unfortunately, due to a number of sort of technical challenges that they have faced related to interconnection issues specific to virtual net energy metering, and some discussion and dispute over tariff language there, Sunrun has not been able to get interconnection approval on those units. It's still an ongoing process. They're working through it with PG&E. It is unclear when or if that may get resolved. And so we were faced with a decision to either amend it or potentially terminate that contract. We have elected to at least attempt to amend that contract. And the amendment would be to convert that to projects that are generally on single family homes as opposed to multifamily homes. And it would make projects or houses throughout California eligible and not just Alameda County. Certainly those are fairly material changes that would no longer make this project really a local development project, unfortunately. And we acknowledge that. But in light of the challenges that Sunrun is facing, it was seemingly what was necessary here in order to get some resource adequacy out of the projects. So in light of the sort of constraints and tightness in the market for resource adequacy, we did elect to still move forward. Well, we are in the process of trying to still move forward with them and get proxy demand response, which is a form of resource adequacy through these alternative sites. The silver lining, if you will, is that we have a separate contract that we have with Sunrun to do load modification. So it is a alternative approach to providing resource adequacy support whereby they are not actually providing resource adequacy in the form of a specific compliance product, but really working with us to try to alter our load in a way that reduces our resource adequacy requirements in sort of an indirect way to provide a comparable product, so to speak, similar to resource adequacy, or not so much a product, but really bring us the value and the benefits alternatively to providing a compliance product. So that is a contract we have in place. They are still focused on that. Their intent is to bring forward whatever projects were being proposed for the proxy demand response contract, which is what we're talking about here, and still get the benefits through load modification through this other structure. So I think that's sort of the positive on this development. But unfortunately, this contract itself, which is separate from the load modification contract, needs to be altered. And so that's what we're posting here is an amendment that I just summarized. That's a pretty quick summary of it, but those are kind of the key facts. And so I will stop there and take any questions.
Thank you for that. Adrian, were there any comments received by 5 p.m. yesterday or any members of the public with their hands raised?
There's no public comment for this item.
So this item was specifically requested that we,
There is now one hand raised for public comment.
Excellent. Then if we can recognize, I think this would be Naya. Is that correct?
Yes, hold on one second.
One of two Jessicas.
Hey, it's Jessica.
Oh, it is Jessica.
The actual Jessica.
Kind of like, will the real Jessica Tovar please stand up? I actually have a question around this. I mean, I actually want to understand more of what is causing the stalemate, and I can't help but it seems like PG&E. But what, like, has there been any idea about how to resolve this so that a virtual net energy metering program or project can be successfully implemented? I'm just wondering, like, what more can be done? Yeah, that's my question.
Would you like me to answer that, Chair Eldred? I'll take that as you are muted, but I will go ahead and respond. Well, I will say a couple things as a disclaimer. I'm not the one dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. JP Ross is dealing with it more with Sunrun, and I'm standing in for him while he's on PTO, so I may be lacking on some of the technical details or specifications there. But my understanding is, unfortunately, it is a bit of a stalemate with PG&E, and we, EBC, is not a direct party to that dialogue. It is really between Sunrun and PG&E, and while we've certainly try to assist there from a relationship perspective, and where we can from a technical perspective, though, we won't claim to be the experts there in trying to resolve what they're dealing with. It is, from what I'm hearing, it is a little bit of a stalemate, and so it's not very clear how it will move forward, if it will move forward. I think there are some policy changes that may be necessary in order to ensure that it has a path forward. Though, based off of the direction that Sunrun and PG&E have received from the CPUC, where I think it is generally to say, please resolve this dispute, it's not clear that that will happen either. So unfortunately, that's part of the reason why we are bringing forth an amendment here, as opposed to trying to continue to work through this process to try to keep the initial configuration intact and moving forward. It wasn't really clear to us the timing to be able to resolve this, unfortunately. I know that's probably not a very satisfactory answer, but it's sort of a reflection, I think, of just kind of where we're at and the need to sort of get on with things and try to amend this thing and get something out of it. But I will say we are also going to work with Sunrun to try to continue to see if we can work through a path forward in the future. So despite an amendment here, I should know, we're not giving up and saying we're not going to focus on this anymore. We're just saying, let's at least get some configuration that can work with this type of proxy demand response product, get that delivered. That is at least a step in the right direction. We're also working on our load modification structure, which I noted. And I think a multi-family unit interconnection solution is also there that will continue to get some time and attention. And hopefully there'll be something that we can bring forward in the future. Chair Eldred, you're still muted.
What do you do? Jessica, did that answer your question? Do you have any follow-up? I mean, you only use like 4 seconds of your 3 minutes, so.
Yeah, I think, maybe it might be a follow-up conversation when JP's back, but I'm just trying to understand. It just seems pretty clear, right? PG&E is problematic, making it difficult. And that is why we're trying so hard to advocate for changes in policies that actually advance these kinds of projects. And I guess part of my thought is like, is there a role for us to weigh in? That's part of my question. I would love to follow up with JP about this. But, it's stalemate sounds like there's something happening that we're not allowed to discuss. So, I can only make assumptions at this point. But thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I'll reach out to JP when he's around.
Thank you. Member Hernandez.
Thank you, Chair. And then thank you, Howard, for the presentation. I just on the second page of the report, it says fiscal impact and negotiated price reduction from Sunrun based on the change from the low-income multifamily projects to statewide single-family projects. I know that the amount is redacted, but when you define projects, are these existing properties or new properties that you're shifting over to until further notice, until the stalemate is resolved? Because how do you define a project? Anything that they work on? Sometimes I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, so in this case, the resource adequacy is being provided by a product called proxy demand response. And so that will be sized based off of specific number of homes and batteries, all residential behind the meter. My understanding is they are all at this stage existing projects, because we are hoping for this to start delivering a portion in 2022 and a portion in 2023. So let me clarify that a little bit. A portion of these projects are operating and existing, and then a portion will be coming online probably over the course of the next year or so. So these are sort of generally new projects, though, where they are recently within Sunrun's sort of portfolio of active projects.
And again, going back to projects, is that new housing that's getting created? It's existing housing that we're putting the solar on the roof.
That is not a detail I have. I'm not sure if the housing itself is new housing or existing housing. My guess is it is existing housing that is getting solar put on. I don't know that doesn't necessarily impact at least the energy products that we're pursuing. So to be honest, it's not really a detail that we've kind of delved into too much, but it'd be my expectation that they're existing houses.
And there's no way to work with new multifamily products, specifically affordable or low income or workforce housing, to drive, something else to do with the net metering. Is there anything else we could be doing to bring that value forward?
I think for the purpose of this contract, I would say we're kind of behind where we need to be as is, and in light of market conditions being fairly tight for resource adequacy, we felt like this was the best way to find a relatively quick solution to delivering a product to us that is still being provided in the similar manner to what they originally proposed. I think we will continue to work with them on our LMA, our load modification construct, on looking at single family homes, on multifamily homes within territory, and thinking about the fastest way to sort of deliver some value or benefit to EBC from an energy product standpoint. And so I think on that front, absolutely, and it is in fact active. Whether it can be done as a PDR, I think, is the challenge here, and we haven't quite been able to figure out that eloquent solution, if you will.
Yeah, and then just one last comment, and this is more around the comment from earlier, just looking at the end of life around ESG and how we sort of responsive and sort of supporting recycling of panels, and what is sort of Sunrun's commitment to not just at the end of the life of the panels just being dumped in landfills and being toxic waste, whereas maybe 1 or 10 of the panels are recycled, and the parts there are maybe not as valuable, but it does impact our streams of water. So we have to be careful and sensitive to that, and hopefully Sunrun can be committed to making sure that at the end of life of these panels, any panels we're working with, or any providers we work with, are being responsible about end of life agreements, maintenance, and then seeing them maybe be recycled or reused or upgraded as maybe they become cheaper and cheaper products out there in the community to provide the renewable energy. But we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot by having renewable energy, but dirty water, dirty streams, toxic landfills that really ultimately doesn't improve the health outcomes of our community members, but negatively affects them. But hey, they're getting good solar. So I just want to be sensitive to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hernandez. Member Suzanne?
Thank you very much. I wanted to, first of all, ask about the workaround. Is it a direct comparison of the amount of benefit that would have been made from the first contract, or for multifamily, you're talking about quite a few people, obviously potentially more wattage installed versus the amendment, which would be a single family. So just the comparison in, say, production that might come out of this. And then the second thing that this brings about is it seems to me like a disturbing precedence that PG&E would stand in the way of a solar project that would benefit people, especially low income. So maybe something can be done to eke out their true intention as far as why, maybe a strongly worded question to PG&E as to exactly why they're putting hurdles in front of this project. And then, so that was the second one that this brought up. And then the third thing about the toxic waste, I saw the article about it, and it blows me away that we don't talk about, the oil or the cars that, the gas tanks and all the other problems that fossil fuels present in their end of life or the total life cycle. It's just a kind of a complaint, that it's similar to birds getting killed by, wind farms and whatnot. I mean, I understand. I want the whole world to be pristine and everything else, but to focus on something that's a 25-year life cycle and toxic waste, I mean, it seems to me a little bit of a distraction for us to hold back on the solar industry. So I just kind of wanted to comment on that. But the first two are really for you, Mr. Chang. Was the fact that there's a comparison. Does it compare this amendment? And second, is there going to be something that is going to come from PG&E? Is this going to be a precedent where they're going to just keep doing this to stall things? Anyway, thank you very much.
Absolutely. On your first question, the sizing question, this is the same contract size that we had in place to begin with, 500 kW, half megawatt. So there's no expected change to that, though I should clarify that I believe it's 300 kW will be delivered this year and likely another 200 K that would be delivered next year. So it ends up getting phased in light of some of the challenges that we face there. But overall, aggregate size is expected to be the same. On the working communication with PG&E, I think it's a pretty nuanced issue. I think there likely is some regulatory policy channel to try to push on here. Some of that has been worked, and as I briefly noted, I think there was some direction given back to Sunrun and PG&E say, go work this out. So it's not exactly clear what the next steps will be to try to enable this type of a structure. The issue specific here is for VNEM on multi-family units. And so it's a little separate from, say, single family housing issues. So I'm hopeful there is a path forward. Certainly if there is a regulatory or policy action to take, we will likely be involved with that as we obviously have engagement with Sunrun to try to find a path forward. So, I guess more to come, so to speak, unfortunately.
Thank you. Member Liu?
Howard, thank you for the presentation on this topic. I have probably just a couple of basic questions. First, I just wanted to clarify, we are talking about just 1.5 megawatt solar plus storage projects. Is it correct, or we are talking about several similar size projects?
It is one contract, but under the contract, even though, as an entity of our size, we buy a lot of energy, so 500 kW is fairly small in the grand scheme of things. But for behind the meter residential, 500 kW would still be an aggregation of quite a number of individual projects. Yeah. So this is one contract, but it would be a portfolio of houses and projects.
So Sunrun cannot deliver any of those.
Under the old construct for multifamily housing VNEM, they cannot. Under this new proposed amendment, where it's single family housing and allows for a broader territory, they can. And that's what we're trying to get to a final agreement on.
So from EBCE side, what's our expectation on the number of projects we expect? Is it 10 or 20 or hundreds?
That's a great question. Again, we've been more focused on the overall aggregate number, which is 500 kW. So I don't specifically have that number off the top of my head. I would guess we're talking about in the kind of upwards of 100 project range. Certainly in the multiple tens of project range. If you assume residential housing, anywhere between 4 and 8. Kilowatt type systems. So, I would envision this to be, many projects.
Okay. And when we add all those projects together, that's many megawatt, or that's a 0.5 megawatt?
It is 0.5 megawatts. Yeah, so fairly small as it relates to our overall procurement needs.
Oh, I see.
So it's aggregating to 500 kW.
I see. So the impacts on us is not huge, but just the issue here is we expect to have fairly easy contracts, but seems PG&E change some regulations, rules, tariffs, and that affects the delivering of our project.
That's right. Yeah. And I'll note, yes, this is a fairly small contract size as it relates to energy products and our budgetary impact. When we initially signed this contract, fairly groundbreaking at the time. I think that predated your participation in the CAC, but did get a lot of attention through the OCI, Oakland Clean Energy Initiative process. We were quite excited by what we were able to agree to here with Sunrun. Obviously, maybe a little bit ahead of its time, given the challenges we're speaking to here. But despite it being a small contract size, we felt it was fairly meaningful to be able to take behind the meter residential projects at the time specifically focused on multifamily low-income housing and to get wholesale energy products out of that. Obviously, that's something in concept we continue to try to do, work very hard to try to do. There are scaling issues and challenges related to taking behind the meter resources as opposed to larger utility scale wholesale projects that we would typically do. But we think it's an important and meaningful step to sort of open up a new avenue for creating wholesale energy products. And so still very much so interested and committed to trying to do that. But I think you're right to highlight, yeah, it's a pretty small contract size at the end of the day. We've expended more time and effort, per kilowatt here than on many of our other contracts, but hoping that it can still lead to a broader offering and larger megawatts at the end of the day for the California market.
Understand. You answered my question. Thank you, Howard.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Howard. Member Hernandez, we'll go back to you.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want a quick follow-up. I was on the board in 2019 when we did move that forward, and I was proud to be part of the board to move this forward, Sunrun, and move us forward. I think one of the things that I also recalled out when we were talking about multifamily housing and projects, you have folks in the community there that are maybe doing the Ubers and the Lyfts, and they need charging stations. And by putting these panels, it could maybe drive some charging solutions there in the neighborhood. So that way, maybe that's a solution. Also putting those charging stations in the neighborhood with those panels, feeding that storage to charge up those vehicles. I think that might be an opportunity that could be discussed. So very supportive, and to Member Souza's point, it's not meant to be a distraction. I think it's more of a footnote, thinking about the end of life of any product. What are we going to do with the panels? Can we encourage, incentivize to really recycle them? Looking forward, that we do want to have better, cleaner energy through panels, and things may change, but we got to think about the end game there too, about what's going to happen to the products and their life cycle. So very supportive of solar. I'm just thinking forward based on that article that we read. I think you read it as well in the East Bay Times, and then went back to the Harvard Business Review, and more stats were there about 78 million tons of waste by 2050. So that's like, okay. And I know we have a climate crisis more than ever. And so I think we have to find ways to do this and that, not either or. So supportive of doing more, of course. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And yes, I had I don't know, I had a spin-off question from that. So I received some comments from the public that I didn't necessarily know the answers to. So while not exactly directly related, I do want to just float them at you, even if you don't have an answer right now. So one of the concerns that was brought to me was around how long Sunrun maintains a relationship with their customers, and whether these customers that are coming from us or from incentives with us or through contracts with us or any of those things, if they maintain that relationship, if they are part of servicing those solar panels and doing those kinds of things, or if those contracts are sold, or what happens to them? Like, what does that relationship with our customer base look like? And I know it's not exactly directly related here, but it is questions that I've received that I just didn't have answers to. So I'm wondering if either you can follow up with me about that, or you know the answer to that.
I can certainly comment on some aspects there. I know you're very acutely distinguishing between kind of the Sunrun contract we're talking about here and this maybe being a slightly separate issue, but I will just make sure to clarify that, you know, the amendment we're talking about for this particular contract, we're talking about actually having it outside of our service territory. So it doesn't necessarily touch on your points of they're not necessarily EBCE specific customers. I just want to highlight that for, I think that was known, but just to make sure that was clear. For in general though, for, you know, for say Resilient Home, which is looking at EBCE specific customers and that load modification structure that I mentioned, where they are EBC customers, or I suppose outside of our territory, even if they're not EBC customers, the question still stands, you know, what does Sunrun do with those customers? Do they continue to serve those customers? We're not directly involved with that is the short answer. I am, you know, sort of generally familiar with how residential solar is done, which is if it's leased, then there is a very formal role that a Sunrun would play in terms of continue to operate and maintain those panels over some period of time. And that period of time would certainly be determined by the contract length that they specifically sign with the residential homeowner. In cases where it is a cash sale, where it is not leased, but installed and you know, sort of turned over in terms of possession and ownership to the residential owner. Oftentimes for residential solar, there is not sort of a long-term servicing plan, but certainly there are warranties that are in place. It's a fairly good, the good thing about solar is a fairly passive system. So there's not actually a lot of work that that a provider needs to you know, continue to do to operate and maintain the system. With that said, there certainly are basic warranties. Every provider is a little different, but I think generally 10-year warranties to 20-year warranties, depending on the type of work, whether it be workmanship or the actual panels themselves. So they all have kind of varying warranties that exist there. But otherwise, the relationship really depends on whether it's a lease or sort of a you know, sort of a install and handover situation with the end user customer. Does that sort of answer your question?
I think it probably answered the one I asked. I think I probably did a poor job summarizing. So I'll just take a closer look. I think there was some questions about leasing and Sunrun in particular, but I'll take a look at it and figure out how to reframe that. I really appreciate the presentation and the efforts by staff to figure out how to make things work. And we appreciate the update. So seeing no further questions, are there, I'm not seeing no members of the public have raised their hands. Is there any other comment from this body? Awesome. Then seeing that instead of going to the last item, I will go back to the chair report where I made an error. In my defense, I am calling in from vacation. So the report that William sent me was for the May meeting, not the June meeting. I attended the June meeting and just had the wrong records pulled up. So I wanted to give folks the quick summary of what happened, and we're wildly going to close this meeting on time. So the big agenda items from last time, from the last board meeting, were the budget. If you remember, we had a pretty lengthy discussion about that. What happened there is that the board decided to pass the budget without the $15 million grant as part of it. And and that passed. So I believe it was Director Kalb who suggested that that item be separated from the rest of the budget, and so that happened the way. So the board passed the budget. We have a budget. It's good, and the $15 million allocation to go to children's spending off was pulled. The board did direct staff to come up with a number of different options to take a look at it, and that will be going to the next executive meeting, which is on the 29th. I believe that is the middle of the meeting. So if you cannot attend that because of work conflicts or whatever, you can submit a written comment to it. And so, then it'll come to vote again in September. So the executive committee is going to make a recommendation. If you want to have weigh-in on what's happening there, participating in that is your best chance. I will do my best to be there. It is in the middle of my workday too, so I don't know that I can, but if I can, then I will go and do my best to express the concerns and summary that this body agreed on, and we have in writing that's been submitted. So that was the biggest thing from that agenda. And that was pretty much the whole meeting. So beyond that, we do have a new full member. So I do want to welcome Member Souza and say thank you so much for your preparedness and participation. And we're just really grateful for it. And to let you know that one of the founding members of the CAC who was scheduled for a transplant actually had to have that delayed because of COVID. So our thoughts and prayers are still with Reverend Chambers, and we'll keep you updated as best as we can. So that is the total of the rest of that report. So sorry for getting that confused earlier. And are there any questions on that at all? Okay, seeing none, I will move to the next item, which is the member and staff announcements, including requests to place items on future CAC agendas. And just so y'all know, Adrian has been doing a fantastic job of keeping a running list of all the things that are there. And we've been figuring out how to work stuff into agendas as time allows. And I do just want to make sure that we have included in that list a follow-up from JP at some point around the metrics. I know that there was some technical issues that were being worked out around that. So just so you know, that we'll be coming back and see if there are any other announcements.
Chair, are we able to request items
Yeah.
like having Sunrun come and tell us, basically how well the customers are being satisfied, or their metrics or ESG policies? Just something that maybe we get a representative from Sunrun to speak to, what they're doing well, what they want to do better in the relationship. So maybe somebody from that team who wants to talk about the success in supporting their community.
We can add a follow-up on that in some form for sure.
Thank you.
As soon as we can. Mm-hmm. Anything else? Member Landry?
Yes, since we're not meeting until September, and I know we can't schedule everything in the following meeting, I'm curious are we supposed to be reviewing the call center again this November?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know. So we will add that to the list, and I can add that to the report we give on Wednesday. Thank you. Cynthia.
And that would be obviously the in-house call center.
Yep, I remember for sure.
Thank you.
Yep. Anything else? Yep, Member Souza.
I would like to not overburden our September meeting, but maybe in the future put something together for maybe some discussion with staff. Maybe I have a small presentation for electrification in homes. If we're going to be doing all of these renewables, and we're going to be moving away from gas, fossil fuels. How are we going to make these homes, especially residential, multifamily, suited for these moves to electric heating, such as heat pumps and water heaters that are electric. So I do want at some point in time to just maybe put like a little bit check mark out there for maybe a small presentation of what I've seen in homes, because I visit a lot of homes. And, it's going to be a stretch, and we're going to have to. It's going to be a long-term project to do this electrification. So I just want to kind of start that conversation at some point. Maybe not in September, maybe in October.
It'll be added to the list and will be addressed as we both have staff capacity and as there's either related topics or motions or space. But yeah, there's some really interesting stuff and challenges, especially around existing building electrification and electrification of older homes. And it's definitely a good discussion to have, because boy, it makes a difference. All right, Cynthia, is your hand still up or is it up again?
I'm putting it down. Thank you.
All right, great. Then seeing no further comments, we will adjourn this meeting. The next meeting of this body is in September. Adrian, I just closed my agenda foolishly. Do you have the date of the next meeting?
Monday, September 19th.
September 19th. But remember that there are other meetings if you want to attend. The board meeting is this Wednesday. Executive meeting is the 29th. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that August tends to be a recess. So thank you all for your participation tonight, and for the most efficient staff presentations in the history of time. We are actually closing on time. So you have a great night, and we'll see you in September.
Great.
Thank you.
Happy summer.
Happy summer.